The night was quiet in the city of Busan. The usual sounds of the city were a soft, distant hum. In a small apartment, a man named Jin was putting his son Dee to bed. Day was 6 years old with bright, curious eyes. He loved stories about space. "Tell me the one about the Mars rover again, Appa," Day said, his voice sleepy. Jin smiled. He was a quiet man who used to be a pilot for deep space cargo runs. He knew all the best stories. "Again? Okay. A long time ago, people on Earth built a little robot with wheels. They called it Curiosity." Jin told the story, his voice calm and even. He talked about the red dust and the big, empty sky of Mars. Day listened, his eyes getting heavier. Jin finished the story and tucked the blanket under his son's chin. "One day will I go to Mars, Appa?" Day mumbled, almost asleep. "Maybe," Jin whispered. "You can go anywhere you dream of." He kissed his son's forehead and turned off the bedside lamp. The room was dark except for the soft glow of the moon. Jin walked to the large window of his apartment. He looked out at the peaceful city and the dark sea beyond. Above, the stars were sharp and clear. He felt a deep love for his son and a quiet hope for the future. It was a perfect, normal night. Then the stars began to disappear. It was not a cloud. It was a shape, a vast dark shape that slowly moved across the sky. It blocked out the constellations one by one. It was a ship, but it was like no ship Jin had ever seen. It was all sharp angles and dark metal, silent and terrifyingly huge. It was so big it felt like the sky itself was falling. Jin stood frozen, his hand pressed against the cool glass. His pilot's mind tried to understand its size, its technology, and failed. It made no sound. No engine roar, no hum of power. Its silence was more frightening than any noise. All over Busan, all over the world, people looked up. Lights went on in buildings. Cars stopped in the streets. A collective whisper of fear rose from the city below Jin's window. Then beams of pale, shimmering light shot down from the ship. They were not lasers that burned. They were like solid pillars of misty light. One touched down in a park. Another touched a school. Another hit a residential street. They moved slowly, deliberately. Jin's blood ran cold. The beam was not aimed at military bases or power plants. It was aimed at places where children would be. He turned from the window and ran. His heart was a frantic drum in his chest. He burst into Day's room. The beam of light was outside, moving closer, lighting up the room with an eerie glow. "Day!" he shouted. The light passed directly through the wall of the apartment. It was not solid, but it had a purpose. It touched Day's small bed. For a single horrifying second, Day's eyes opened. They were wide with confusion and fear. He looked at his father. "Appa?" he whispered. Then he was gone. The light vanished, and with it Day. The bed was empty. The blanket was still crumpled from where he had been lying. The room was silent. Jin stood there, unable to move. He stared at the empty bed. His mind refused to accept what his eyes had seen. The world outside was erupting into chaos. Sirens began to wail. People were screaming. But in Jin's apartment, there was only a deep, ringing silence. He stumbled forward and fell to his knees by the bed. He grabbed the small pillow and pressed it to his face. It still smelled like his son. A single illustrated storybook lay on the floor. The title was Our Solar System. The World Descended into Madness. The same thing had happened in every major city on Earth. Seoul, London, Mumbai, Cairo, Mexico City. The story was the same. The ship appeared, the beams reached down, and the children vanished. Not all of them, but millions. Every child between the ages of about 5 and 12 who was in the path of the light was gone. The militaries of the world scrambled. Fighter jets were sent into the air. They flew towards the massive ship, their missiles armed and ready. They fired. Dozens of missiles streaked through the night sky, heading for the dark vessel. The missiles hit an invisible shield around the ship. They exploded in bright flashes of fire and smoke, but the ship was untouched. It did not return fire. It did not even seem to notice. It continued its silent, terrible work. For 7 minutes, the ship sat in the sky. For 7 minutes, it stole the children of Earth. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, it was gone. The stars reappeared. The sky was empty. It was as if the ship had never been there at all. But the emptiness it left behind was real. Jin did not move from his son's room for a long time. The sun rose, casting a cheerful light that felt like an insult on the broken city. He could hear the distant sounds of crying and shouting. He finally stood up, his body aching. He walked to the window. The city was wounded. He could feel the grief rising from the streets like a fog. His personal communicator was blinking with dozens of messages. He ignored them. He looked at the empty bed one more time, then walked out of the apartment. He did not know where he was going. He just walked. The streets were in chaos. People were running, crying, holding photographs of their missing children. News screens showed the same images from all over the world. The same story of loss. He found himself at the large park near his home. It was where he often took Day to play. The grass was scorched where one of the beams had touched. A small red child's bicycle lay on its side, abandoned. A woman was on her knees nearby, sobbing uncontrollably. A man stood staring at a swing set, utterly still. Jin looked at their faces and saw his own pain reflected back at him. It was a pain that was too big for one person to hold. Later that day, a woman named Commander Su Min stood before the leaders of the world. The meeting was on a large screen, connecting every surviving government. Her face was pale, but her voice was hard as steel. "They are gone," she said. The simple words hung in the air. "The invaders took our children. They did not attack our soldiers. They did not bomb our cities. They took the one thing that matters most. They took our future." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes burning with a cold fire. This was not a battle. It was a theft. They stole the next generation. They think we are weak. They think we will grieve and surrender. She paused, letting her words sink in. They are wrong. We will find them. We will get our children back. And we will make them understand the cost of touching a single one of our own. Jin watched the speech on a public screen in the city square. The people around him were silent. He saw the determination on Sumin's face. He felt the same feeling growing inside his own chest, pushing aside the suffocating grief. It was not hope. It was something darker and stronger. It was rage. He looked down at his hands. They were the hands of a pilot, an engineer. They were good with tools and systems. He had knowledge. He had skill. He could not fight with a gun, but he could fight in other ways. He turned away from the screen and started walking with a new purpose. He did not know where he would go or what he would do, but he knew he would not rest. The quiet, peaceful man he had been was gone, taken along with his son. The man walking away from the square was someone else. He was a father with a mission. The sky, once a place of wonder and dreams, was now a reminder of the enemy that had come in silence and left in silence. But Jin knew, as did every person on Earth, that the silence would not last. Humanity had been awakened, and it was furious. The silence after the abduction was the heaviest thing Jin had ever felt. The world did not feel real. Colors were dull. Food had no taste. He moved through his empty apartment like a ghost, his eyes always drifting back to Day's closed bedroom door. He had not opened it since that night. He could not. For 2 weeks, the planet was drowning in grief. The news showed nothing but stories of missing children. Candlelight vigils were held in every city, the flames a small weak fight against the overwhelming darkness. People argued and pointed fingers, but their anger had no target. The enemy was gone, leaving no clue, no message, no reason. Then the call came. It was not on his personal communicator, but on a secure military-grade device he had not used since his deep space pilot days. The message was simple. Report to Geo Command. Your country needs your skills. Jin arrived at the massive buried facility under Mount Namsun. The air was cold and smelled of metal and filtered air. He was led into a large windowless room filled with screens and quiet, intense people. At the center of the room stood Commander Su Min. She looked older than she had on the broadcast, but her eyes were the same, hard and full of fire. Jin, she said, her voice low. We have pulled every expert in xenotechnology, quantum physics, and astrometrics. We have all the data from the event, but we are missing something. You have a mind for alien systems. You see patterns others do not. We need that mind now, Jin simply nodded. He had no words. But he had a purpose. He was given a station next to a woman named Hana. She was an astrophysicist, one of the best in the world. Her face was pale and tight with stress, but her hands moved over her console with sharp, precise movements. For 2 weeks, I have looked at the energy signature of that ship, Hana said to Jin, not as a greeting, but as a statement of fact. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Every weapon, every engine leaves a trace. A fingerprint. Theirs is strange. It is not like anything we have. Jin sat down. Show me. Hana brought up complex graphs and waves of light on her screen. They did not just travel through space. They folded it. They made a shortcut. When they left, space itself snapped back into place like a stretched rubber band. But it did not snap back perfectly. It left a scar. Jin leaned in, his pilot's mind engaging fully for the first time since the abduction. A scar? What kind of scar? A quantum resonance decay, Hana said, pointing to a nearly invisible line on her screen. It is a path of broken physics. It is incredibly faint and fading fast. Most scientists would say it is background noise. But it is not.
It is their trail. Jin looked at the data.
He saw what she meant. It was a thread, impossibly thin, stretching from Earth out into the deep black. Can we follow it? No, Hana said, her fist clenching on the desk. Not with our current sensors. Our telescopes are not tuned to see this. It is like trying to hear a whisper in a hurricane. We need a new ear. A better one. So they began to build that new ear. Jin's engineering skills, once used to repair cargo ship engines, were now focused on a single, impossible task. He designed a quantum resonance scanner. It was a device that could be fitted to the most powerful space telescopes. A device that could listen for the whisper of folded space. Hana provided the complex math, the calculations of cosmic background radiation and quantum foam. Jin turned that math into machinery, into crystal focusing arrays and supercooled receivers. They worked without rest. They did not talk about their lives. They did not talk about the children. They talked only about the work. The work was all that mattered. Days blurred into nights. They drank bitter coffee and ate bland food from the facility's cafeteria. Sometimes Commander Suman would stand behind them watching in silence. She never pushed them. She just watched, her presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. One night, very late, it was just the two of them in the lab. The main lights were off and the only glow came from their monitors. Hana was staring at a star chart, her eyes hollow. My niece, she said suddenly, her voice quiet in the humming dark. Her name was Micha. She was 8. She loved to dance. Jin looked up from his wiring. He saw the raw pain on Hana's face, a pain he knew was on his own face every second of the day. My son Day, he replied, the name feeling both painful and good to say out loud. He wanted to go to Mars. They did not say anything else. They did not need to. The shared loss was a bond stronger than any friendship. They went back to work, but the air in the room felt different. They were no longer just a pilot and a physicist. They were two people trying to pull their children back from the dark. After 21 days, the scanner was ready. It was a strange, delicate-looking instrument, all wires and polished crystal. It was installed on a telescope in a remote desert, far from the lights of any city. The entire team at GeoCommand gathered in the main control room. The air was so thick with tension you could almost touch it. Hana sat at the main console. Her hands were steady as she began the activation sequence. Jin stood behind her, his arms crossed, his heart beating hard against his ribs. Powering up the array, Hana said. Initiating quantum resonance sweep. On the large screen at the front of the room, a star field appeared. It was beautiful and peaceful. A green line representing the scanner's focus began to move slowly across the screen. It was looking for the whisper. Minutes felt like hours. The only sound was the quiet whirring of the computers. The green line moved back and forth. Nothing. Then a sound. A faint, wavering ping from the speakers. A thin, shimmering line of gold light appeared on the star field. It was jagged and broken like a crack in glass. It started at a point near Earth and stretched out into the depths of space, ending at a distant, unnamed star. A collective gasp went through the room. Hana zoomed in on the endpoint. The star was a yellow dot labeled only by a catalog number. She cross-referenced the data. Her breath hitched. There, she whispered. Then she said it louder, her voice cracking with emotion. There, it has a planetary system. One planet is in the habitable zone. Its atmosphere matches the residual particles we found in our own atmosphere after the ship left. She turned to look at Jin, her eyes wide, filled with a terrifying mix of horror and triumph. We found them. The room erupted. People cheered, some cried with relief. They had a direction. They had a target. Commander Sumin stepped forward. The celebration died down instantly. She looked at the golden thread on the screen, her face like stone. Good, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Now we know where they live. Now we know where they took our children. She turned to face the room. This is no longer a search mission. This is now Project Gwangbyeon. Project Vengeance. She looked at Hana and Jin. You have given us a path. Now we must walk it. The question is no longer where. The question is, what now? What do we do when we get there? The room was silent. Everyone looked at the star on the screen. The star that held the thieves of their future. The mood shifted from celebration to something darker, more determined. The grief was still there, but it was being forged into a weapon. Jin stared at the distant, unnamed star. It was just a dot of light, but it held his son. He felt a coldness settle in his heart. The time for searching was over. The time for planning had begun. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to his bones that whatever came next would be terrible. The mood inside Geo Command changed completely. The quiet despair was gone, replaced by a busy, focused energy. They had a target. The star system was named Krylus. The planet was designated Krylus Prime. Every telescope on Earth and every probe in the solar system was now pointed at that single point of light. For weeks, data streamed in. The images were blurry at first, then they became clearer. Krylus Prime was a world of sharp crystalline structures and vast silent cities. There were no green forests, no blue oceans. The planet looked like a giant dead jewel. Then they found the children. It was not a happy discovery. The children were not in prisons or cages. They were held in massive circular facilities that glowed with a soft, pale light. Each child was suspended in a beam of energy, asleep and unmoving. Their faces were peaceful, but they were pale and thin. Wires and tubes connected their small bodies to the strange, crystalline machinery of the planet. Hana analyzed the energy readings, her face growing more grim with each passing hour. It is not a stasis field, she finally reported to Commander Sumin and a room full of silent officers. Jin stood beside her, his hands clenched into fists. What is it then? Sumin asked, her voice hard. They are being used, Hana said, the words tasting like poison. The Krylons are not biological anymore. They are beings of pure consciousness stored in those crystal towers, but their minds are decaying, dying. They cannot create new life, so they steal it. She pointed to the screen showing the sleeping children. They are siphoning the children's neural energy, their life force, their dreams, their potential. They are using our children as batteries to keep their own dying civilization alive. A wave of pure, cold hatred swept through the command center. Jin felt sick. His son, his bright, curious Day, was being drained to fuel these monsters. This was worse than death. It was a violation of the soul. Commander Sumin stood up. Her face was a mask of controlled fury. Options, she said. The single word echoed in the silent room. A general spoke first. A full military assault. We send our entire fleet. We break through their defenses and take the planet by force. Hana shook her head. Impossible. Their planetary shield is orders of magnitude stronger than the one on their ship. Our strongest weapons would be like throwing pebbles at a fortress. And their fleet, she brought up a new image. Around Krylus Prime, thousands of Krylon warships floated, a silent, invincible armada. Outnumbers us 1,000 to 1. It would be a suicide mission. We would all die, and the children would be lost forever. Another person suggested a stealth mission, a small team to infiltrate and disable the shield. But the planet's defenses were too advanced, its security too tight. They would be detected and destroyed long before they reached the surface. The meeting went on for hours. Every idea was proposed and every idea was shot down. The problem was too big. The enemy was too strong. Hope, which had flared so brightly when they found the trail, was beginning to die. Jin listened to it all, his mind racing. He was not a soldier. He was an engineer. He thought in systems. You do not fight a fortress head-on. You do not attack an army. You attack its foundation. You cut off its head. He looked at the main screen, which showed the Krylus system. The yellow star Krylus was at the center. Everything, the planet, the ships, the enemy, depended on that star. It was the source of their light, their heat, their gravity, their energy. A terrible, dark idea began to form in his mind. It was so horrible he tried to push it away. But it kept coming back. Later that night, he found Hana in her lab. She was staring at a simulation of the Krylus star, her eyes red from lack of sleep. Hana, Jin said, his voice quiet. What if we don't fight the army? She looked up, tired and confused. What do you mean? What if we don't fight the army, he repeated. What if we don't attack the planet? What if we make it so the planet and the army don't matter anymore? He walked to her console and pointed at the simulation of the star. We attack the kingdom, not the castle. Hana's eyes widened. She understood immediately. The sheer terrifying scale of the idea left her breathless. Jin, you are talking about a stellar-level weapon. They took our future, Jin said, his voice flat and cold. So we will take theirs. All of it. Hana was silent for a long time, staring at the star on her screen. She was a scientist. She understood stars. She knew their power, their life, their death. To weaponize that, it was a crime against nature. It was a sin against the universe. Then she thought of Micha, her niece suspended in that cold light, her young mind being slowly consumed. She thought of all the other children. She looked at Jin's face etched with a pain she shared. She turned back to her console. Her fingers began to fly across the keyboard, calling up new equations, new models. A forced quantum collapse, she whispered, more to herself than to Jin. We would need to deliver a catalyst directly into the star's core. It would destabilize the fusion process, trigger a runaway gravitational collapse. She worked for hours, the math unfolding in a terrifyingly beautiful pattern. Jin watched, providing engineering insights, thinking about delivery systems, about shields that could withstand the star's corona. By morning, they had the rough outline of a monster. They called it the stellar collapser. It was not a bomb. It was a key that would lock a star into its own grave. They brought the proposal to Commander Sumin. They presented it in a small private room. There were no screens, no other officers. Just the three of them. When they finished, the room was utterly silent. Sumin sat perfectly still. Her face showed no emotion, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the table. You are proposing, she said slowly, that we murder a star, that we destroy an entire solar system, that we commit an act of cosmic genocide. Yes, Jin said, his voice quiet but firm. Sumin looked from Jin's determined face to Hana's resolved one. The political fallout, the moral cost. It is beyond calculation. The Krylons made the calculation for us when they took our children, Hana replied, her voice like ice. They are not harvesting us for food. They are harvesting our children's souls. There is no negotiation with that. There is only elimination. Sumin stood and walked to a wall which was a blank, dark screen. She stood there for a long time, her back to them. Jin and Hana waited. They knew the weight of the decision they had just asked her to make. Finally, she turned around. Her eyes were the oldest eyes Jin had ever seen. There is a saying, Sumin said. If you come for the king, you must not miss. She looked at them. We will not miss. We will build this weapon. A secret vote was held by the United Earth government. The details of the stellar collapser were shared only with the highest leaders. The debate was short, haunted by the images of the stolen children. The vote was unanimous. Project Gwangbyon had its heart. It was a dark, terrible heart, born of a love so deep it had twisted into the most profound hatred imaginable. The resources of an entire planet were now dedicated to a single goal, building a device that could kill a sun. The work began in hidden shipyards at the edge of the solar system. Jin and Hana were at the center of it all, the architects of the apocalypse. They no longer saw themselves as rescuers. They were avengers, and they were preparing a revenge that would echo through the galaxy forever. Create more chapters, headings or parts numbers in each par. The ship was called the Zhengzhou. It was not a warship. It was small, sleek, and built for one thing only: silence. Its dark hull absorbed radar and light. Its engine was designed to leave no heat trail. It was a ghost, carrying a weapon meant to kill a god. Inside, the mood was quiet and tense. The crew was small, just 10 people. They were all volunteers. They knew this was very likely a one-way trip. Jin and Hana were among them. Jin was there because his knowledge of the collapser's systems was vital. Hana was there to make sure the calculations were perfect until the very last second. The stellar collapser was held in the center of the ship. It did not look like a weapon of doom. It was a long silver cylinder, covered in complex wiring and cooling vents. It looked like a piece of medical equipment. In a terrible way it was. It was meant to end the suffering of the children by ending the existence of their captors. Commander Sumin's voice came over the communication system from Earth. The Zhengzhou is cleared for launch. Your course is locked. Good luck and bring our children home. Her voice was heavy with the meaning behind those words. The ship detached from the space dock and slipped away into the deep black. It did not fly in a straight line. It moved like a shadow, using the gravity of planets and the dust of asteroids to hide its path. The journey took weeks. The inside of the ship was filled with the hum of machines and the silence of people lost in their own thoughts. Jin spent most of his time checking and rechecking the collapser. Hana stared at her screens, tracking their position in the constant, terrifying data stream from the Krylus system. The enemy fleet was still there, a silent, unmoving wall of ships around their world. They showed no signs of having detected the Zhongzhou. Finally, they reached the edge of the Krylus system. The yellow star Krylus burned in the distance, looking peaceful and normal. It was the source of life for the system. Soon they would make it the source of death. "This is it," the pilot said, his voice a whisper, entering the exclusion zone. Activating full stealth. The Zhongzhou became even quieter. It drifted forward, a speck of dust moving towards a bonfire. On the screen, the planet Krylus Prime was visible now, a sharp, glittering marble. An alarm beeped, soft but urgent. "A Krylon patrol," the sensor officer said. "3 small ships. They are on a standard sweep. Their path will cross ours in 2 minutes." The air in the cockpit became thick enough to choke on. Everyone froze. If they changed course or increased power, their energy signature would light up like a signal fire. If they did nothing, the patrol would fly right into them. "The comet," Hana said suddenly. "There is a comet tail on our port side. Its ionic residue will mess with their sensors. Can we drift into it?" The pilot nodded, his hands moving quickly. "Yes, it is a risk, but it is our only chance." He gently fired the maneuvering thrusters. The Zhongzhou slid sideways, slipping into the cloud of ice and dust trailing behind the small comet. The view from the windows became fuzzy. The 3 Krylon patrol ships flew past. They were close. So close Jin could see their jagged, unnatural shapes. For a long moment, they were right alongside the Zhongzhou. Then they continued on their way, not slowing down. They had seen nothing. A collective, shaky breath was let out across the cockpit. They had passed the first test. They continued their slow, silent approach. The star Krylus grew larger and larger until it filled the entire front window. The heat and light were intense even through the heavily shielded hull. "We are in position," the pilot announced. "We are at the delivery point. It was time." Jin and Hana moved to the deployment console. This was the most dangerous part. The collapser had to be launched on a precise course that would take it deep into the star's core. The Zhongzhou would have to hold its position, its shield straining against the star's incredible energy, for a full 60 seconds. "Beginning deployment sequence," Jin said. His voice was calm, but his hands were sweating. The silver cylinder was moved into the launch tube. Hana fed the final trajectory data into its guidance system. The numbers had to be perfect, a mistake of a fraction of a degree, and the collapser would burn up uselessly in the outer layers. "Collapser is armed," Hana said. "Trajectory is locked. Ready for launch on your mark." "Launch," the captain of the Zhongzhou said. There was a deep thud as the launch tube fired. The collapser shot out of the ship, a silver dart heading straight for the heart of the sun. A timer appeared on the main screen. 60 seconds, now we wait, the captain said. "And we hope our shields hold." The first 30 seconds were quiet. The ship vibrated violently, but the shields held. Jin watched the timer count down. 30. 29. 28. Then, a different, louder alarm blared. "Energy spike," the sensor officer yelled.
They found us.
A Krylon battleship coming in fast. From behind a nearby asteroid, a massive Krylon warship emerged. It was many times the size of the Zhongzhou. Its weapons were already glowing with power. "Evasive maneuvers," the captain shouted. The Zhongzhou lurched to the side. A beam of crimson energy shot past the window, so close they felt the heat. The small ship was tossed around like a leaf in a storm. "We can't break away and maintain our position," the pilot yelled. The timer was at 20 seconds. Another energy beam hit them. The ship shuddered violently. Lights flickered. A console behind Jin exploded in a shower of sparks. "Shields are failing," someone shouted. Jin looked at Hana. Her eyes were wide with fear, but she was still focused on her screen. The collapser was still on course. They just needed a few more seconds. 3 seconds. The Krylon battleship fired again. This time the beam hit them directly. The sound was deafening. The ceiling tore open and the air rushed out into space. Emergency doors slammed shut, trapping Jin and Hana in the damaged cockpit with the pilot. The main power went out. Red emergency lights came on. The ship was dead in space, drifting towards the hungry star. 10 seconds. Hana screamed over the blaring alarms. The Krylon ship was turning, lining up for the final shot. Jin knew it was over. The Zhongzhou would not escape. But the mission could still succeed. He looked at the pilot's console. The thrusters were still online. They had just enough power for one last, short burn. He made a decision. He shoved the injured pilot out of the way and grabbed the controls. "Hold on," he yelled to Hana. He fired the thrusters not to escape but to turn the dying Zhongzhou. He pointed the nose of the ship directly at the Krylon battleship. "What are you doing?" the pilot gasped. "Giving it a distraction," Jin said, his voice grim. The Zhongzhou, burning and broken, sped towards the much larger enemy ship. The Krylon ship hesitated, surprised by the suicidal move. It fired its weapons, but it was too late. The Zhongzhou slammed into the side of the battleship. There was a brilliant, silent flash of light as both ships were torn apart. From a hidden observation post far away, the crew of a trailing Earth vessel watched. They saw the Zhongzhou signal vanish from their screens. They saw the collapser's signal continue on its path, uninterrupted. The timer reached 0. For a moment, nothing happened. The star Krylus continued to burn bright and steady. Then it flickered. The light from the star dimmed like a lamp with a bad connection. It flickered again, longer this time. The surface of the star seemed to ripple, then it began to collapse inward. It was not an explosion. It was an implosion, a terrifying and silent swallowing. The yellow light winked out. In its place, a darkness deeper than space itself appeared. A black hole. It was small but infinitely hungry. It began to pull in the debris from the destroyed ships and then the light from the system itself. The star was gone. The sun of the Krylon system was dead. On the trailing Earth vessel there was no cheering. Only a deep, horrified silence. They had won, but the cost and the terrible nature of their victory settled on them like a weight. They had killed a star to save their children, and they knew the galaxy would never be the same. There were no cheers in the command center. Commander Sumin read the word on her screen and closed her eyes for a long moment. She felt no joy, only a profound and terrible relief. The weapon had worked. The star was dead. She opened her eyes and gave the next order. "Launch the rescue fleet. Go get our children." The rescue mission was not a military operation. It was a somber, urgent pilgrimage. A flotilla of fast, long-range ships painted white and bearing the universal symbol for medical aid sped towards the corpse of the Krylus system. They carried no weapons, only doctors, engineers, and soldiers trained for search and rescue. Commander Sumin was on the lead ship. She needed to see this through with her own eyes. As they approached, the scene that greeted them was one of absolute desolation. The Krylus system was a tomb. The star was gone, replaced by a tiny dark sphere, a newborn black hole. It was invisible, but its presence was a terrifying void that swallowed all light. A faint glowing ring of superheated gas, the last remains of the star, spiraled slowly into the nothingness. The planet Krylus Prime was a frozen, shattered wreck. Without the gravity of its sun to hold it in orbit, it had been flung violently into the dark. Its surface was cracked and covered in a thick layer of ice. The beautiful crystalline cities were now just broken glass, dark and silent. The mighty Krylon fleet was gone, either pulled into the black hole or drifting as powerless frozen hulks. The civilization that had dared to steal the children of Earth was extinct, utterly and completely. There were no celebrations on the rescue ships. The crews looked out at the destruction, their faces pale. They had wanted vengeance, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. This was a horror on a cosmic scale. "Scan for life signs," Sumin ordered, her voice hushed. "Focus on the orbital facilities. The ones holding the children." The sensors swept the dead system. For a few agonizing minutes there was nothing. Then a signal. Faint, but there. A cluster of life signs, weak and fading, in one of the large circular stations that was now drifting powerless and dark. "Lock onto that location," Sumin said. "Prepare boarding parties. Move quickly. Their life support is failing." The rescue ships docked with the silent station. The doors opened onto a cold, dark hallway. The only light came from the headlamps of the rescue teams. The air was stale and freezing. They moved through the eerie silence, their footsteps echoing. They found the main chamber. It was vast and circular, just as the telescopes had shown, but now the soft, pale light was gone. The room was pitch black and deathly cold. The beams from their headlamps cut through the darkness, illuminating the faces of the children. They were still held in the energy fields, but the fields were flickering, dying. The children hung motionless, their skin pale blue from the cold. They were so still, so thin. For a terrible second, Sumin thought they were too late. Then a doctor rushed forward. "They're alive." "Weak but alive. The fields are failing, we need to get them down now." The room erupted into controlled chaos. Engineers worked to safely dissipate the failing energy fields. Medics and soldiers gently caught the children as they were lowered, wrapping them in thermal blankets, giving them oxygen. They were carried carefully to the waiting shuttles, their small bodies light and fragile. Sumin walked through the chamber, helping where she could. She saw a little girl with braids, just like her own granddaughter, and her breath caught in her throat. She saw a boy who reminded her of a picture she had seen of Jin's son. The weight of what they had done and why they had done it pressed down on her. In a distant part of the station, a small team was checking a sector that had been heavily damaged. They were looking for survivors, but expecting to find only the dead. They moved through a wrecked corridor, past the frozen bodies of the crystalline Krylons, their forms looking like broken statues. One of the soldiers spotted a flickering light ahead. It was an escape pod, its door slightly ajar. He moved towards it carefully, his weapon raised. He pushed the door open. Inside, curled in a ball and shivering violently, was a man. He was wearing the tattered remains of a flight suit from the EUS Zhongzhou. It was Jin. He was half frozen and dehydrated, but he was alive. When the Zhongzhou had collided with the battleship, the escape pod had been automatically jettisoned in the confusion. It had drifted, powerless, until the rescue ship's gravity field had pulled it in. The soldier called for a medic. They gently lifted Jin and carried him to a shuttle. Jin woke up in a warm, bright medical bay on the rescue ship. His body ached. For a moment he was disoriented. Then the memories flooded back. The star. The collision. Hana, a doctor, saw he was awake and came over. "Just rest," the doctor said softly. "You are safe. You are on the rescue ship Homecoming." Jin tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The doctor gave him some water. "The children?" Jin finally croaked. "We have them," the doctor said, smiling gently. "They are weak, but they will recover. You did it." Just then the door to the medical bay slid open. Commander Sumin stood there. She walked to his bedside. Her face was tired, but there was a softness in her eyes he had never seen before. She didn't say anything about the mission or the star. She simply said, "Come with me." She helped him to his feet and led him out of the medical bay, supporting his weak steps. They walked down a corridor to a large, quiet room. It was filled with rows of small beds. In each bed was a child sleeping peacefully, connected to monitors and IV drips. Doctors and nurses moved quietly between them. Sumin led Jin to one bed in the corner. Lying there under a white blanket was Day. His eyes were closed in a natural sleep. His color was returning. One small hand rested on top of the blanket. Jin stood there, frozen. He was afraid to move, afraid that if he touched his son, the boy would disappear like a dream. He slowly, carefully reached out. His hand, still rough and scarred from his work, trembled as he gently touched Day's fingers. The touch was real. Day was real. He was warm. He was alive. Jin's legs gave way. He sank to his knees beside the bed, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He buried his face in the blanket next to his son, his whole body trembling with a relief so immense it was painful. He held onto Day's small hand as if it were the only thing anchoring him to the world. He had helped to kill a son. He had destroyed a world. He had lost a friend. He had become a monster to save his child. And as he felt the steady, living pulse in his son's hand, he knew without a single doubt that he would do it all again. The rescue ships turned away from the dark, dead system and began the long journey home. They carried no trophies, no victory flags. They carried sleeping children and a silence filled with memory. Behind them, the black hole continued its endless, hungry feast, a permanent monument to the day the humans came, not with a declaration of war, but with an act of absolute annihilation. The galaxy had learned a new, terrifying rule. Do not harm their children, for if you do, the humans will not just come for you, they will come for your son.